Andrew saying, does the stock market affect the price of Bitcoin? Um, it does in the what we've seen lately because panic is panic. So with the market drop, of 30% before obviously this recent recovery. So, 6 to 8 weeks ago when we were dropping, 30%, almost, we had days where it was close to 5, 10% a day. There was so much fear that people were selling everything. It was very indiscriminate selling. So you saw gold getting sold, which is very counterintuitive. Usually people want to hoard gold during big drop periods of panic. And you also saw Bitcoin drop. In fact, that drop I just showed on my screen was when that happened. That big drop occurred when the market was in full panic mode. So the way Bitcoin should work, and I think will more and more work in the future, will be as a goldish type thing, meaning that when inflation rises, when the government prints a lot of money, which it's been doing to the nth degree recently, when the Federal Reserves around the globe do the same thing, or when there's fear in the market, then Bitcoin should rally, a store of safety. But it's still too new of a thing, of a technology, where people are still a little skeptical of it. And I think that's why you still see it sell when the market's in panic mode. Um, and again, you saw gold sell too, so it's really now gold didn't sell that much, not like Bitcoin, but yeah, I think that's the issue right now with Bitcoin is that it's so new, especially to big money. Big money's been very hesitant to put a lot of capital to work in Bitcoin. Um, that it's still scary to people to hold Bitcoin. Now, over time, in the next 10, 20, 30 years, it should become a staple of a portfolio, whether it's a hedge fund portfolio or someone at home, just like gold is, right? Pretty much every hedge fund, manager or at least individual, multimillionaire holds a little bit of gold, a little bit of silver, some oil, obviously, and we've seen what's happened to that recently. But it's a part of a diversified portfolio, and I do think Bitcoin eventually gets to that stature. Now the question is, at what price will it be at that point? And that's what I'm curious to see. Will it be 100,000 per Bitcoin? My guess is, and I made this call. So I said at the beginning of this year, even late last year, I said gold will hit 2,000 this year. We're already a good chunk of the way to that. I think in the next 5 years, Bitcoin does hit 100,000. But again, it's going to be, who knows? I could be wrong too. I think part of the key too is that the newer generations are much more accepting of cryptocurrency. So, if you look at the big, like even my parents, I trust me, when Bitcoin was in the high 3,000s, 4,000s a while back before it had the run to 10, and then obviously that big dip back to 3,900. But man, I tried everything in the world. I said to my dad, I was like, man, just pick up a few, just do it, like, but no, it's not going to happen. Um, so the older generations, not everyone, but a lot of them, it's a very hard concept to get. People say that, wait, so this is a digital currency. What's that? Like it's created out of thin air. What's that? And then I hope my rebuttal as well. The dollars are now our dollars in this country are now created out of thin air too, by the way. The only difference is you can actually hold a physical dollar versus a Bitcoin. Um, but almost dollars are now becoming, I mean, how many of us use cash anymore? It's basically digital. I mean, the difference is you can still get cash out of the bank, but I mean, I almost never use cash. I always use card or whatever, and part of it is, credit cards give you rewards, so I'm like, well, might as well get a cool reward out of this or a trip to the Bahamas or whatever when I save up enough points. But But yeah, I mean, the dollar's becoming more and more digital as well. But it's still, to the older generations, it's still a very kind of foreign concept. They're all used to, first of all, a lot of them were alive when it was backed by gold. Now it's not backed by anything but the government, which is the scary thing. If it was still backed by gold, I think you wouldn't have as much of a need for Bitcoin. I really don't think so. But when governments can just say, oh, we're going through a recession, let's print $10 trillion. Boom, throw it out there. Let's bail out everyone, which is what's going on right now, what happened in 2008, 2009 as well. That's the issue. That's the scary thing, man. That is scary. All right. Anyways, enough of that rant there. But good questions. I love talking about that. Yeah, turn the printing presses on. Let's print another trillion. And the thing is, it's not even printing presses anymore. It's literally a click of a mouse button to create $1 trillion. That's what's scary. The Fed literally sits down at their computer and goes click, click, click. Okay, there's a trillion. All right, let's do it. Yep, nuts. Yeah. I know Nick is not as much of a believer in cryptocurrency, but Nick's an older school guy too. I think that's the key. Yep. And that's the key is that you got to have believers and non-believers, and ultimately we'll figure it out. I think the best, hopefully it never happens, but the best parallel to what's been going on for the last 10 years and even more so now is, Germany in the after World War One. That when it takes a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread, stuff's gone really wrong. And to make, basically when Germany lost the war in World War One, they had to, I mean, the allies that were against them made them pay massive reparations, massive payments, to the point where what they had to do is they just had to print it all. So they printed massive amounts of money to the point where they diluted their own currency, and their own people literally, I mean, it took a wheelbarrow full of money to go buy a loaf of bread. And I mean, I won't get into the history of it, although I love history, but it obviously led to the rise of fascism and all that stuff in Germany going into World War II, because people were so kind of, turned off by the whole scenario and what they were put under following World War One. It kind of led to that, people willing to look into something else, a different way of doing things, essentially. But yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, Michael's saying there's stories about the Weimar Republic, where people literally had to chase creditors and force them to take money to pay off a debt with worthless paper. We could come to that. Yeah, I mean, that would be the absolute worst case, and hopefully it doesn't get to that point. But um, my guess is eventually you'll have a scenario where there's kind of a reverse stock split with the dollar, where they'll say, okay, and this is again, this is me just brainstorming, and I'm going to step off after this, but my guess is you'll have so many dollars in the system and they'll be so worthless that at some point there'll be a scenario where the US government creates a cryptocurrency, and they say, okay, for every dollar you have, you can exchange, let's say, I don't know, $100 for one of this currency, of this digital currency. And by the way, the government wants to go to digital currency. All right, you might think that's crazy, but the government wants that. All right, the reason they want it is because it's a lot easier to track payments when everything's digital. There's no hiding like, oh, someone paid me in cash and I didn't pay taxes on it. Ha ha ha. So digital is actually the way that the government wants to go, but my guess is they'll eventually have to do essentially a reverse stock split on the dollar. Yeah, Michael's saying Denmark, no cash allowed already. Yep. Yeah, Michael's saying recall of the currency's been done in China, Cyprus, and other places in the very, very recent past. Yep. Yeah, you'll definitely want to own gold and silver coins, absolutely, or just gold and silver, period. Yeah. Yeah. Carrie's saying they've been setting us up for this for the last few years. Yeah, again, I don't necessarily think there's a they out there. I'm not a believer in this deep state shady stuff, really. I just think that it's human nature. So I mean, you have a lot of converging issues that are just creating this perfect storm. And honestly, a lot of it comes from greed. So you have scenarios where you have um, politicians that need to be reelected, so they never want the economy to go into a deep tailspin, because then they're not going to get reelected. This is one of the reasons why I'm a huge fan of making a presidential term 6 years, but then no election after it. Same thing for Congress. Make them a little longer, but then there's no reelection, because then the incentive to do what's good in the short term but not good in the long term, there's nothing there anymore. There's no incentive. You don't have to get reelected. So you can look and say, well, what do I want to do for my kids that's for the best? Because right now, that's not what these politicians aren't doing that. What they're doing is what's good for the next 2 years until my election so I can get reelected. So I don't want people to be unemployed for 2 years because they're not going to vote for me. So yes, it might be good for us over the next 30 years, and we might be stronger for this, but oh God, let's not do what's right. Let's instead do what gets me reelected, which is make sure that everyone has their crappy job versus doing the hard things that maybe get people better jobs in a couple years. So there's a lot of scenarios where, so then the government then creates a scenario where, okay, we're just going to continue to flood and keep companies afloat and do this and print money and do bailouts and so forth. And then the Federal Reserve gets sucked into it. They're supposed to be independent, but you know, obviously we've seen the pressure that Trump's put on Powell and so forth, and it does have an impact. I mean, as impartial as you can be, no one wants to get attacked on Twitter every day of the year. It's going to have some impact. His job, he has a mandate to keep unemployment at this level and inflation here, and he doesn't want to be. I mean, who would want to be the Federal Reserve chair during a Great Depression? No one, right? I mean, just naturally, heck, if I was the Fed chair, I wouldn't be like, yeah, I'm going to do the hard decision because, it's better for the country in the next 50 years, but we're going to have to go through a Great Depression where, you have 40% unemployment and people are starving and kids are dying on the streets. I mean, no one's going to do that. So human nature is going to make the Federal Reserve more conducive to making sure that the bailouts come, the printing of money comes. Don't let it happen. And part of the issue is that the Fed started on this path a while ago, and it was small. It didn't take a lot of money to bail out the system. But every collapse which is being created, so every bubble is being created by the previous bailouts. All right, it creates incentive to take bad loans and give bad loans. It creates incentive, more money in the system flows into the stocks to make crazier valuations. And the thing is, so you had, like, even just going to the late 90s to 2000s, you had that bailout and those credit results, meaning free credit and cheap credit, created the housing bubble. Well, now the Fed is like, oh crap, all right, so this is collapsing now. We can't let this get too bad. I don't want to be the Fed chair during a Great Depression and everyone hate me. So, all right, let's bail them out. They bail it out. All right, well, now you have a bigger bubble. The snowball rolling down the mountain gets even bigger. And now you have another scenario where if we actually let the economy fall, it's going to be the worst Great Depression, worse than the 20, 29, 30, 30s. And so the Fed's like, oh my God, we can't let this happen. I'm not going to be the dude on watch during this. And so it's it's just this confluence of these scenarios that have come to pass because of people taking the easy route. And again, we know this in our lives, right? All of us have kids, or most of us have kids. If you let your kid get away with something small, what's going to happen? Well, they're going to try to get away with something a little bit bigger. And if you let them get away with that and you bail them out, like if you bail your kid out, he gets a speeding ticket. Oh, don't worry about the speeding ticket. I'll pay it. No big deal. Well, where's the incentive to not speed again? Or you could even use jail. Like, if he gets thrown in jail for disorderly whatever, and you bail him out. Oh, don't worry about it. I got your back. Well, now he's going to go out and do something a little worse. So it's human nature essentially that takes these paths, and ultimately it leads us to a cataclysmic event, which will cause a reset in the whole system. And it is what it is. It is what it is. And luckily, we're in a position to know these things and be in a position to hopefully protect ourselves and our families. And that's the only thing listen, I'll tell you guys and I'll tell anyone who wants to listen about these things and how to protect yourself. But each individual is it's up to us to do it. And I'm glad you guys are with us, and hopefully you learn over the course of time, and you're able to protect yourselves and your families, and that's all we can do. But yeah, I mean, the system. I do hope that when the final collapse occurs and we emerge a lot stronger in terms of our thinking. Like, I would love to see terms for politicians be limited to one term, even if it's a little longer, one term. Um, it's just, I'd love to see a lot more, um, situations where there's not a right or a left, but common sense. There's lunatics on both sides of the aisle, and I think most Americans fall somewhere in the middle. You know, um, so you hope that from it emerges smart thinking. And I do think that after the Great Depression, there was a little bit more common sense that came in, and then the process began all over again, where over time people forget the issues of the past. Um, they forget what caused the issues, and it just becomes ancient history, and you think that nothing can go wrong again, and it enables people to slightly get out of control slowly. And then the control gets looser and looser and looser until you have to have a repeat of essentially the Great Depression-ish type scenario. So, yeah, anyways, Keith saying, I agree with you 100%, no re-election for second term. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I truly believe that's the only, there's a lot of things. I'd love to get money. I don't know what the Supreme Court was thinking when they allowed, the lobbying money to basically take control of thing. I don't know. That's a whole nother can of worms. I don't know about that, man. There's been a lot of things that have really screwed up the system. And I'm not, get into that as well, but let's hope that it all gets taken care of at some point. Yeah. All right. Ooh, that was heavy. Um, on that note, let's just make more money here, folks. That's what we're here to do. I'm going to jump off for lunchtime. I will be here as I always am. If there's a great trading opportunity that I see, I'll jump back on. But great talk and great job today. Two winners, 2 for 2. Yesterday, 5 for 5. Let's just keep the steamboat going and have a great lunch, guys. And Nick will be on at 1:30. Yeah, David, absolutely. All right, have a good one, guys. Take care.